welcome to this event, and welcome to Innovation Week. Welcome to Oslo, home of the spray can. I'm very happy to welcome you all who are here in person, but also those who follow us online. My name is Mihaela Tabacaru, and I am a team leader for events and IP training at the Norwegian Intellectual Property Office. I haven't worked there very long, just 10 months, and when I started there was because I am an extremely curious person, and I have come to the right place because it's a bunch of very curious people who work at the Norwegian IP office. We are hosted today by the Oslo Science Park, and because we are here, I have to say a few, you know, the people on at the fly attendants. Emergency exits are there, behind the curtain and back there. We have this event in collaboration with Oslo Science Park, and it's because we are actually also celebrating a 100-year-old patent, which is that of the spray can. The spray can has been invented by a Norwegian. His name was Erik Rotheim, and it was patented in 1929. And hold your horses, the patent said, a method for spraying or distributing liquids or semi-liquid masses. Try giving that as a prompt to generative AI. The inventor actually died young. He was only 40 years old, and he never saw his invention commercialized or never imagined its subsequent success. But this has become the stuff of the street art artists. The funny thing is that its success and breakthrough came only when the giant DuPont made a bet on the spray can, and the US Army was ready to buy an unlimited number. So that was where it broke through. The point is that big companies and partners are very, very important today, as they were yesterday, for distribution of your invention. But it also poses some big questions. Who owns what you're creating? Is ownership really a problem? Is it enabling? Or is it hindering? The Oslo Innovation Week is under the Pioneers title, and I promise I will stop speaking soon. The only thing that I want to say is that we at the Norwegian Property Office, we support and inspire pioneers. We want them to move frontiers, and that's what we're doing now. We have never done this in this format before, so it will probably go very well. Our speakers are also pioneers in their own way. From training opt-out solutions to investing to law specialists looking forward for seeing what AI Act consequences are, and also researcher moving frontiers of what AI can do together with artists. So what will happen now? We'll have 3 speakers that have answered our challenge to who's right. And the 4th one will join us towards the end to a panel discussion. And if you have questions, and prepare for that you will have a Q&A session at the end. So write down while it's fresh so you don't forget it. Okay, our first speaker is Silvija Seres. She is an AI expert and author, a mathematician and a tech investor. She has worked on algorithm research in Oxford, development for the research engine AltaVista in Palo Alto, strategic leadership in fast research and transfer in Oslo and Boston, and later in Microsoft. She now works as a board member in major companies like DNV and Ruter, and is an active investor. She's going to talk about is using AI cheating. Please, warm applause to Silvija Seres.
Thank you, Mihaela. So I think this is a super interesting event because very often we talk about AI in terms of what can it do for me. And it's a really, really interesting time for AI right now because we are moving from this scared fascination and pure entertainment to understanding that this is a tool and we have to use it. And normally companies want to know, the last few months, they only want to know, what can it do for me? And until now, we have been very scared. We are like, well, we have to wait for the EU AI Act, and we have to think carefully about GDPR, and we haven't even started worrying about IP and, are we stealing other people's creative work? And I think that it's really good that we are going to worry even less going forward. So I'm going to be provocative here on stage today. I think there is something brutally Darwinistic about how AI is changing every industry, including creative industries. And that's really the thesis I want to lay in front of you. And my conclusion in many ways is that this is actually good for the really good artists, and it's going to be really bad for the really bad artists. So the good ones get even better, and the bad ones get basically evolutioned out. We had an example. Cullen will probably have a different view on this, but we discussed a little bit before stage, and I gave example to Benita and Benedikte and Cullen on how I'm writing courses at the moment. My life mission at the moment is to creative lifelong education that works for all. So I really have, which will be affordable, so $100 a year for unlimited learning. I think we need to create new content for this. I think this content has to be created in a much more efficient way than what universities are doing at the moment. They are really slow and really conservative, and their content is outdated, unless it's foundational stuff. A friend of mine who's a professor has been discussing this with me, and he said, well, Silvia, do you know what's the real likeness between a graveyard and a university? And I was like, no. He said, well, it's equally hard to move them because the people who are already there don't want to help you. And so I think this is valid for many, many industries because people are used to doing their work in a particular way. They're really good at it. They're really happy with their position and their specialization and expertise. And they're not really keen on changing a winning game. And then comes in AI. And what happens with the roles and the jobs and the way that we execute our work is really interesting. And I'll get back to AI in a second, but so for these courses, I create some art. I believe that it has to be a little bit eye-candid because otherwise people just don't want to follow. It's a bit like creating a new Duolingo. It's just for topics like compliance and AI and sustainability. So my prompt to Midjourney is something very similar to Banksy. And my question is that plagiarism? And Cullen's comment was, well, he's a biography artist, so actually he's quite well known and he's quite well protected and he doesn't have to worry. But the people who are the unknown artists in many of these productive spaces, they will be the ones who are really affected by this. And my reaction to that is, well, tough luck. If you can't produce something that's better than what AI is producing now, then, maybe you're not that creative. And maybe this will challenge the way we think about creativity, and this will be, well, what's your real unique IP? And I'm not a lawyer, so maybe you can help us here. But I think in many ways, AI is asking us a question more about, what are you uniquely good at and what is really unique about you? So when some 10 years ago, one of the really big kind of surprises about the quality of generative AI was when it was able to produce a Rembrandt plagiarism, which the best Rembrandt experts in the world couldn't. It was basically an unknown Rembrandt that turned up. And people thought, amazing, but it was really done by AI. You know, is it art? Is it art? Human has made it than if an AI has made it because it's just an algorithm. And one of my most kind of interesting challenges intellectually came after reading on this topic, came after reading a guy called Jaron Lanier. So he's one of the really big guys in VR. And he used to run around dressed up in a lobster suit back in the days when I was in Silicon Valley. And everybody used to laugh at him. And Jaron goes with dreadlocks and tie-dye t-shirts, and he looks really weird, and he's brilliant. And so he has a couple of books that I really, really think everybody should read. One of them is called You Are Not a Gadget, with you know, the value of really what we are creating and the value of things going forward. And so one of the reasons why he was going around dressed in a lobster suit is that the first time he got dressed in VR, gloves, there was a bug in the program. So one of his fingers in VR was suddenly as big as a tall building in Vancouver. What he was creating really, really early on is a three-dimensional VR space for walking around cities, in this case Vancouver. And so he realized that his brain got completely weird when he was suddenly walking around with a finger size of a skyscraper. And then he started thinking, well, what will it do to my brain if I go into VR and be a cloud or be a lobster? So he's completely obsessed with, what's the right word for octopus and all the 8-legged things? Yeah, octo something. Yeah. So so he tries to understand, you know, our brain and our creativity and our way of thinking. There is all the Chomsky stuff and how languages form us. That's the analytic stuff. But all the other stuff has to do with our body and how our body perceives the world. And so if you suddenly have a body that doesn't have 2 arms, 2 eyes, and 2 legs, and all this symmetry, but rather has 8 of those, you know, how will your psychology change? And this is a super interesting thing. So Jaron, is also a brilliant musician. And to me, these are really creative questions about our psychology, but also about our creativity, right? And I'm not talking yet about IP. So the other thing that he was writing about that really kind of shook me was, so his mother was a concert musician. His family had to escape Europe in the Second World War. And they were living in this really weird circular construction that he and his father built. And his mother was a concert musician before she died really early. And Jaron is also a brilliant musician. And he was really, really early on working on MIDI file formats. And he hates them. He says that's not music. So he said, and he collects really old instruments, so Turkish lira or really old kind of instruments. And he says there is something about playing a Stradivarius where there is a physical interaction between that instrument and the room you're in and your body, and the way that you as a human interact with the physicality of that. And I think this is super interesting related to the virtual lives that we are now increasingly living. And to be honest, I'm nowhere near as good with my listening to music as he is, so I'm happy with Spotify. I'm even happy with, you know, spoofs of ABBA songs. He wouldn't, right? So this goes back to our way of interpreting the world. And I'm going to conclude this very long introduction now with my personal example on going to a cinema with my husband. And I love movies. And I really, you know, I'm into really Kurosawa and you know, Citizen Kane is the best thing ever made, etc. It has to be black and white because all the other, and VR movies, please save me, you know. But we went to watch a movie, and I usually check them on IMDb. I used to check them on IMDb. And after the movie, I asked my husband, did you like this? And he said, why don't you just ask IMDb? That's what you always do. And I was saying, I actually don't want to know what IMDb thinks about it. What I'm really curious is what you think about this movie. I'm far more interested in your human interpretation of this rather than, whatever is some sort of an analytical answer to it. And to me, this is my position on this whole IP thing and art. I think that AI will do amazing things for us, but it doesn't really feel or know what it's doing. It is very creative because it can see patterns we humans haven't seen. It can accelerate production along certain patterns, and maybe the core of that is, whatever it is accelerating on is the IP here. But I think that it's the interpretation of the world and of the art that is the real human job here. And when it comes to AI, I'm very much focused on making money on it rather than, being philosophical about it. So, is it right or wrong? I don't know. But it is going to create a lot of really good advertising stuff, really good illustrations, really good jingles. And then the question is, how do we define art and where is the human uniqueness? And as much as I tried to copy Banksy in my illustrations, I actually get really cool, technically cool illustrations now. And it has taken me a year to figure out how I want to make them. So I have grown as an artist, but I can't copy Banksy because Banksy has this interpretation that's political, that is really satirical. He can put in things there that this AI just, maybe 1 in 1,000 would, accidentally hit on the right satirical interpretation of whatever prompt I gave it. But it'll be just accidental, right? So this way of seeing the world, and you remember these Banksy images where, during Corona time, 2 people are involved almost having a sexual interaction, but they have face masks on. Or, he can really put his finger on, the weirdness of the lives we are living. And it's the recognition of that beautiful weirdness in him and in Munch and in everything else that makes us enjoy that art. And it's that human weirdness that is probably the core of art. It's the human condition being interpreted in music or images or whatever that is really amazing here. And then maybe I'll say a few words also about AI, more technically on this. So my background is mathematical, and I worked on algorithms, and I'm an old AI gal. So I worked with expert systems. We were using them in systems like Watson and IBM's DeepMind, if you remember that. You remember the thing that won over Garry Kasparov in chess? So the question is, was that creative? Garry Kasparov was convinced that the computer can't win over him in chess because he's talking about this tacit knowledge, his intuition for chess. Well, IBM's Deep Blue won, okay? Likewise, Watson from IBM won over Ken Jennings in Jeopardy. You have to understand satire. You have to understand that Big Apple really means New York. You have to do quite good NLP, natural language processing, to do that. We still wrote it off as not really creative. But when DeepMind, from at that time DeepMind, but now Google, 2 guys barely finished with their PhDs, created this tool based on deep learning and generative AI that won over the world champion in Go. Then suddenly we paid attention because we didn't think that was possible. Now, there is not necessarily a very, very big breakthrough in terms of algorithms or mathematics. The real breakthrough has to do with the amazing computational power and the amount of data that we can train these systems on now. And there are lots of artistic data to train them on, and we'll get back to this later. It's really important that you understand the difference between these 2 kinds of AI. So the old-style AI, expert systems, they're really built on logic, mathematical logic. We talked to experts. Let's say we talked to an artist and we asked them, what are your rules? How do you think when you create things? We code those rules, we give some data to the system, and it analyzes them. So this is a really good tool for analysis, and it could work on, analyzing what's a good dance move, or what is a cancer image, or what is the new trend in demographics or in a particular financial market. This is what we used for protein folding. This is what we used for quant stuff in finance. The new kind of AI is based on statistics. So it is the other way around. We start with data. Data is at the core of this generative stuff, and then it looks for patterns. And it's really well-known statistics. Some of it is 100-year-old theorems, like the Bayesian theorem, probability and statistics. But the amazing thing is the amount of computing power and the amount of data. And once you have the whole internet to train your OpenAI ChatGPT on, 1.3 trillion documents, not characters, not words, not paragraphs, documents, and some of them are very long, some of them are Shakespeare's works, and it's all been digitalized because Google, etc. Suddenly, 1.3 trillion documents give you an amazing input to look for patterns in how humans work with language, right? But somebody had to put that data in. Somebody had to train ImageNet and explain to them, this is a chihuahua, this is a muffin, this is a traffic light, etc. Somebody had to train the music stuff. Somebody had to make that data provided in digital spaces, in digital formats, etc. But once you have the data, you look for statistical patterns, and then you can recreate them in this GPT or other algorithms, generative, pre-trained, transformer. Generative, it makes something new. Pre-trained, let's say ChatGPT from OpenAI, done training in September 21, and it was released in November 22, right? Pre-trained. And then transformer, it keeps changing what it gives you based on the buffer it has in its conversation. So it's going to create amazing texts. I'm now creating courses that are really my conversation with ChatGPT. The stuff that I'm creating is at least 10 times better and at least 100 times cheaper than the stuff I used to create when I was creating courses together with 6 other people. They had master degrees, they had to listen to podcasts, they had to extract the best points, summarize it, make quizzes, make dilemmas. It sucked. Honestly, humans are intellectually lazy. They picked the 3 words they didn't understand, and then they wrote that as the summary, the sentences around them. ChatGPT does a better job. I still need to know what I want it to say, and I need to know how I want it formatted. So it's my IP, but it really sucks for the 6 people that are now without jobs. Nobody's going to lose their jobs to AI, but they're going to lose their jobs to somebody who is now using AI in order to be more competitive. I had to stop doing things the old way because we ran out of money. People are expensive. Now, it costs me, I don't know, maybe $500 a month in licenses to ChatGPT, Midjourney, 11 Labs, Synthesia. I have a toolbox that costs a few $100 per year rather than several $1,000s in salaries. Is it cheating is really the question to you. If you don't think that using Excel is cheating for accountants, if you don't think that using a washing machine is cheating for housewives, if you don't think that using an auto gear car is cheating for driving, then you shouldn't be thinking that using AI is cheating. It's just a new tool. The question is, what do you do with that tool? That's your real IP. And then the question is, if you think you have a really unique way into something, will this tool destroy your business case if you are an artist? And again, I'm very Darwinistic about this. So I think that if you're really good, really brilliant, really unique, if you have an Avicii bone, then really great for you. You will just do much more than before. It will change the way you work. I recently talked to a female artist who gets Midjourney, DALL-E, to draw the sketch of what she's going to paint. she's killing it. Nobody can understand how she can come up with these amazing things, and she's selling it really well. She paints it by hand. The inspiration comes from here. Is that cheating? I think that we have to think about this as a new tool. The data is out there. The Pandora's box is open. So the question is, what will you do? What will you do with this? And this keeps reminding me of an old Tom Lehrer song. So I was in Oxford some 25 years ago. It's called Lobachevsky, and it really has the premise that all research is plagiarism. It's really funny to listen to. We used to laugh at it when we were in Oxford, because we know that every bit of research you do is based on something that somebody else has been doing before you, and you're just twisting it a little bit. So is the same valid for art? I don't know. I hope we'll get some more answers now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Silvija. I know you have to go and you won't be able to stay for the panel right afterwards, but I have a couple of questions for you if you have time now. You said that you used a year to be good at giving the right prompts to get the right thing out of it. Well, what was it that made it? What was your learning journey here?
I think these tools are changing the way that we create. And so I think it's a bit like learning to talk to somebody who doesn't speak your language. And you have to kind of use your hands, and you have to push them, and you look for reactions in order to understand, how does that thing really think? And so it took me a long time to realize, for example, first of all, I had the usual irritations. Why does it have such a hard time drawing a proper hand? It's always 4 or 6 fingers, well, it's because, it's a statistically based tool. So the idea of what a hand is really has to do with, something that has fingers attached to it, but not necessarily the number of those fingers. So you have to understand how the thing has its thinking. And then you understand later on how I want it, so it's really like learning to have a new friend. And you're training it as much as it's training you. But I find that process actually to be really creative. And it doesn't require any technical skills. It requires you to be curious. And so when I hear teachers in schools say that, will we play with our students? By the way, is it cheating to use ChatGPT in schools or in research? I think that those who think that this is cheating will be outcompeted immediately, and our kids are not going to stop using it the same way that they're not going to stop using YouTube for learning. So I think that it's really important to make friends with the tools and maybe test different tools to understand what do I like. And remember, you're not becoming a nerd because you're using this. You're just having a new brush or a new kind of a musical instrument in your repertoire.
You mentioned also just at the beginning that it's hard to change graveyards. This is a very difficult thing to change systems. But you have experience working against the current, swimming against the current. It's called in English. What do you think it takes to change the way that we think?
I think this happens on its own. So if you think 10 years back, and I didn't want to have a smartphone. I didn't see the point of a smartphone. I was very happy with my Nokia, and I learned to press 3 times for the right button, and I was sending emails and SMSs. It was doing the job I needed it to do, right? And the good battery, good antenna, the toy from Steve Jobs. I didn't have time to play Angry Birds. I didn't need that. A few years later, maybe I can move my Zen Creative into that. A few years later, I need that for my bank account. I need that for whatever I'm doing on the internet. I need that for my work. I need that to track my kids. Now I can't do without it. And so I think it'll be the same thing with AI-generated arts or AI-generated anything. Now we are like, I'm perfectly happy with the way I'm doing things. I'm good at this. This works for me. No, thank you. But a few years from now, it'll be like, well, maybe it actually really can help me do all the, think of it as like the old Michelangelo's. He didn't do the Last Supper. He did the basic idea for it, and then he had an army of helpers, assistants, juniors, that were doing all the stuff in, the boring stuff. That's how we will work with art going forward. You will do whatever you are unique at, and then you will get the system to help you with the rest. And basically remove those people who are always, I don't know, taking a lunch break or whatever is in way of your creativity. My way of working with AI is really dangerous for myself. I have ADHD, and I can get almost psychotic because I don't want to stop. I don't want to go and get coffee. I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to go and cook for my kids. I'm having so much fun creating. And so I think this is really important to find the right way to work. This is not the right way to work with it. And so the meeting of humans and this thing is a really important topic. The legal stuff of what's uniquely ours is another really interesting, both philosophical, psychological, and legal question. But I think maybe most importantly, and there is a business issue around this as well. I have a friend in London who is now training a musical generative tool. He's trained it on all the ABBA songs, and he's creating new plagiarisms of ABBA, and he's killing it. And why not? So I think that we don't need to change the system. There will be pioneers changing it, and they will be the ones defining the new system. Will you be one of those, or will you be, saying that I really don't like this, I'll wait until it goes over? That's maybe the main question.
Thank you so much. Thank you again. Now we change to something completely different. Our next speaker actually comes all the way from Germany, especially for this event. Cullen Miller is the VP of Policy in a company called Spawning. He is also an engineer, a spatial media designer, and a musician. He is based in Berlin and San Francisco sometimes, as he says. He is going to talk about how, I'm not going to introduce his talk. You go ahead, Cullen, please take the stage.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cullen, and I'm the VP of Policy at Spawning. We are an organization building data governance solutions for generative AI, and today I want to talk about our approach to building data sets from first principles. Okay, so picture this. Imagine a scholar entering a grand library seeking specific academic works for their research. However, upon entry, they find that none of the books have titles, authors, publishing dates marked on them. Citations and references are missing, turning the search for reliable sources into a guessing game. Just as a scholar can't construct a credible thesis under these conditions, AI developers really struggle to build reliable models when their training data lacks clear attribution, provenance, licensing, etc. So this crude analogy aims to outline the current state of training on web-scale data collected for training models. So often we have little understanding of what exactly is in the data sets that we use, who owns this data, how it's licensed, or whether it's gathered with the consent of the data owner. So while Spawning strongly believes that web crawling is a healthy property of an open public internet, these techniques for amassing web-scale data sets inadvertently have created some novel challenges for web standards, intellectual property law, and data governance. The problem really escalates when we consider the absence of detailed provenance or licensing information. The critical details that dictate how the data is, how it can be used responsibly and legally. So without this clarity, how can model trainers assess the risk involved with deploying such data? They ultimately currently face a legal minefield, depending on your jurisdiction, but definitely in the EU. So this Wild West approach has really left us with data sets that are messy, both from the standpoint of IP as well as from the perspective of data science. So if you're a model training company entering the field, your developers essentially have to rely on these undocumented pools of data to train a competitive model. And this ambiguity isn't just a technical nuisance. It's a fundamental challenge to the way that we mediate intellectual property rights. So rights holders, from creators all the way up to corporations, have historically had no clear machine-readable mechanism to signal how their data can be used during training, or if at all. So this lack of signaling mechanisms means that as data sets are compiled and recompiled, the original data permissions are stripped and lost entirely. This scenario leaves rights holders ultimately disempowered and model trainers navigating a potential liability labyrinth. And the scale of this issue is non-trivial. Consider training a foundational model requiring a web-scale corpus far beyond the reach of the largest IP portfolios. It's not just about compiling data, it's about ensuring that this compilation respects the myriad of legal rights that are intertwined with that data. The current state of affairs, where data is collected relatively indiscriminately, means not only that we might be infringing upon rights, but also that we're training models on potentially unsafe, unvetted content. In sum, the disconnect between creators of data and those who train AI models has led to a climate fraught with uncertainty, risk, and stifled innovation. It underscores a need for a systemic overhaul in how we source, manage, and compensate training data, ensuring alignment with the highest standards of quality, safety, and consent. Okay, so this brings us to why our company Spawning was conceived. So recognizing this gap between recent technical advancements in AI and our existing intellectual property frameworks, we saw an imperative need for what we were calling a consent layer in AI to operate as a substrate for a fair and healthy market. We saw the solution to the problem operating on a continuum, as you can see here. So on one side of that continuum was a rights reservation mechanism that excluded data from training data, colloquially known as opting out, or a do not train assertion, depending on your jurisdiction. On the other side of the spectrum resided a permissive use that allowed training, known as opting in. We believe that most data providers and rights holders can occupy a position on the spectrum and should be able to easily communicate their preferences and should have a nuanced set of permissions that they can set for their data usage requirements, and that this assertion should be machine readable. To address which data cannot be used for training, we asked ourselves, how can we create a mechanism that both emboldens rights holders and assists model trainers to train models in alignment with rights holder preferences? So what our answer was to build a multi-utility piece of infrastructure that enabled artists, publishers, and rights holders the ability to proactively register and manage the use of their IP in training data sets, while simultaneously streamlining the model training workflows, ensuring a singular solution for compliance with the emerging regulations. So we're calling this suite of tools the Do Not Train tool suite. I'll talk about those in a minute. And while do not train assertions while do not train assertions provide the foundation for establishing preferences, our newest product, Source Plus, expands and extends those permissions beyond opting out, enabling the data providers to opt in to participating in the new data economy by configuring more permissive uses with conditions, licensing, attribution, provenance, and remuneration built in. On Source Plus, you can know what's in your data set, where it's come from, and can find more data like it based on what you want to know about your data. You can search enriched data based on its licensing, its content type, and the subjects of the data to construct data sets from first principles so model trainers can train safely and responsibly. By focusing on these fundamentals, our customers can access data from all over the web with multiple owners and different licenses. But unlike other data sets that often mix all of these together, Source Plus lets model trainers search and prioritize the type of their data based on the decisions that they make as an organization, as a trainer. Okay, first let's take a closer look at the Do Not Train tool suite, a system that consolidates machine-readable opt-outs to simplify and streamline the process for rights holders expressing their data preferences, and for model trainers to acknowledge and respect them. Okay, so our flagship tool, HaveIBeenTrained.com, was launched in 2021 and was aimed ultimately at individual creatives. Through a simple search, creatives can discover if their works have been used in public AI training data sets. So we launched this right as Stable Diffusion was coming out, and artists they didn't understand how this technology worked, you know. So I think it was trying to create a little bit of basic literacy around sort of the statistical methods, so people could find their work in the training data set that was used to train Stable Diffusion, which is the image model that sort of kicked off this the generative AI hype cycle, this recent one at least. Okay, so anyway, as you can see here, I don't have my speaker notes on this, but basically, this is one of our co-founders, Holly Herndon. If you use the search engine, you can search and identify your work in the Lion 5B dataset. This was the dataset that was used to train Stable Diffusion. And you can identify your work, add it to the Do Not Train registry, and all of these works then are indexed. There's similarity scores, and all of this allows you to find data that is similar and likeness to add to your Do Not Train registry. Okay. This is also honored and respected by the creators of Stable Diffusion stability as well too. So let's see. Okay, so the backbone of these Do Not Train services is the Spawning API. Spawning API ultimately works as a filtering mechanism. It operates as an intermediary between model trainers and the data sets that they wish to train on. Its functionality is twofold. So for sites that host user-generated content, our API allows its users to register their works as the data is brought to a platform, for example. And all of those works and their associated preferences enter our Do Not Train registry. This ensures that model trainers can easily comply with the rights holders' opt-out requests and can reduce some of this harmful data in their data sets. Different organizations have taken varying approaches to opting out data, and our API encapsulates all of them. So users only need to register their preferences once to have model trainers aware of those preferences. To counter the trend of proliferating standards that solve the problems for sort of each individual company, we built an API to function as an aggregator that integrates all of the current and future opt-out methods into a single utility to make this easy for model trainers so they don't have to go to all of these different places on the internet and find all of the methodologies for their training pipelines. So this means that our registry will log all registered data permissions across data sets and will remain current with the emerging industry adopted opt-out standardizations. So this makes it easy for model trainers to adhere to all of these machine-readable opt-out methods with only a few lines of code that update dynamically to maintain current permissions. For those of you concerned with the technical integration, we've developed and are maintaining a free open source Python package that we're calling Data Diligence. And you can find it on Spawning's GitHub. So Data Diligence is basically a tool that is designed for developers to easily integrate the Spawning API into their data products or their training pipelines. Data Diligence currently aggregates and supports the TDM rep protocol, C2PA manifests, which is the Linux Foundation's assertion, HTTP headers, no AI meta tags, and AI.text. Okay, so our API is designed with scalability in mind and is capable of handling extremely large catalogs and portfolios. Our API is currently integrated into Hugging Face. If you don't know Hugging Face is the largest host of open source data sets on the web, or public data sets on the web. And it automatically alerts a dataset downloader to the presence of opted out material in our Do Not Train registry. And this applies to all the datasets that are hosted on their site. So this slide is an image of Hugging Face's interface displaying a new 12 billion image dataset called DataComp dataset. You can see here that 1.7% of these 12 billion images are included in our Do Not Train registry. So as soon as this data set is listed on Hugging Face, approximately 204 million, which is the 1.7%, opt-out requests are immediately made available to a model trainer, and they can remove this from their training data before they even download the data set. Our API currently has 2.4 billion independent registrations in the Do Not Train registry, and it's growing. Okay, so another tool that we've built in this Do Not Train tool suite is called AI.text. You can sort of think of this as a robots.txt, but for AI data scrapers. And what this is essentially, if you don't know what robots is, it's a machine-readable signal to web scrapers. Robots is for crawlers. AI.text is mostly for scraping. We can talk about the difference later. Anyway, it's to signal which data they can and cannot use at a domain level, at your website level. AI.text communicates with our API to dynamically update the permissions of the domain owners. And this is another important distinction from robots, is the dynamic ability to retroactively apply permissions. So many major model training companies have proposed just making use of the user agents in existing robots.txt files, but we found at least 4 reasons why robots.txt was insufficient. So since robots.txt is a utility for web crawling, which is an independent process that precedes the training process, it is incapable of knowing or checking the preferences at the time of training. And this is something that Spawning is really emphasizing. So AI checks at the time of training to register the most recent preferences with model trainers, not just at the time of crawling. Dataset aggregation happens in the pipeline after the website has already been crawled. So this leaves links to innumerable works that have already been crawled over the history of the internet before we had this crisis in IP, stranded in compiled datasets with unregistered preferences. So what AI.text does is it affords its users via Spawning's API, the ability to register or update preferences, preferences on this training data in already existing data sets. Robots, you can't do this. So an additional major limitation is the burden placed on rights holder. Whenever new crawlers are introduced. So with robots.txt, there is the option to block all crawlers, but if you want to show up in search engines, you have to define a new rule specific for each crawler. So users most likely want to be indexed and ranked, but not trained on. This also doesn't protect, robots also doesn't protect linked content hosted elsewhere on the web. So for example, if your site has a robots.txt user agent blocking crawlers, but my site does not, and embeds your media hosted on your site, it will still appear in Common Crawl and other data sets that will be compiled, used for training. So we think that overloading a standard, robots.txt, that was developed in the 1990s with functionality that is completely independent from its original design is an incomplete solution, and believe that we need a clean slate to develop a rich machine-readable syntax that encompasses the broad scope of AI beyond search functionality. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep to time here and jump into, we're gonna move on now from the opt-out side of things, the do not train tools suite, and start to talk about Source Plus, which I think is the more exciting part. It's not just about kind of shields up, protect your content, it's about engaging in all of this new exciting affordances that AI has for us. So we initially envisioned Source Plus as our flagship offering, but we soon recognized the necessity of laying down a preliminary framework to protect IP first. You know, basically like when you're constructing a house, you need to put in a foundation first. So creating a viable data economy needed a robust mechanism for data exclusion. Thus, the Do Not Train tool suite became our phase 0, ensuring that rights holders could effectively control their data before we introduced the mechanisms to monetize it. So with this foundation established, Source Plus launched into its first phase in May. And it's poised to refigure how we build, value, and transact IP in generative AI systems. Okay, so we're currently in phase 1, and where Source Plus serves as an advanced data set curation tool, particularly geared towards researchers and AI hobbyists who are fine-tuning models with public domain images. We've recently added a suite of data enrichment features, such as semantic search and reverse image search, that act like a high-powered microscope, allowing users to zoom in on the exact data needed and add it to a collection. For example, an AI developer who's working on a visual recognition system for wildlife can easily locate and curate the specific data for their data sets, comprising of high-quality public domain images of endangered species due to some of the object detection and tagging features that we've recently added under the hood. This capability not only elevates the utility of the data sets, but ensures that models trained on this data are more precise and aligned with the goals of the trainer. Okay, so this quarter we will enter phase 2, where we will be evolving into a dataset marketplace that hosts commercial data beyond just data from the public domain that is in phase 1. So this phase caters to data providers and rights holders who can now onboard and license their data under the new spawning single training 1.0 public license that we're going to be publishing. The current state of dataset licensing has mostly left rights holders negotiating privately with AI companies with the absence of any market mechanism to do adequate price discovery on the costs of their data. Data partners that we've been working with have no idea how to evaluate their data for this new paradigm and are often panicking, selling their data for anything that they can get rather than establishing a fair price. This is not good, obviously. Licensing negotiations with undisclosed pricing is very rarely beneficial to the supply side. So this leaves model trainers with ultimately most of the leverage, since they can set the prices and keep that information hidden from the marketplace. And this is essentially a divide and conquer approach to data acquisition. Data providers and holders of large portfolios of IP are coming to us to now start to establish their prices and set the terms for licensing their work. And this is what phase 2 is all about. So just like the public domain data that is already on Source Plus, our algorithms will enrich and transform our users' data into higher value training data. So imagine a local photography with a niche collection of urban landscapes. Through Source Plus, they can not only make their work discoverable via content tags that we have implemented, but also set their pricing in an open market. All data on Source Plus embeds the Linux Foundation C2PA specification to each unit of data to maintain provenance and licensing throughout its value chain. And this ensures that each piece of data retains its history and ownership through the data's life cycle. Okay, and in Q1 of next year, we will begin phase 3 with the introduction of the spawning 40M dataset, comprising of 40 million images from the public domain and CC0 licenses. This underscores our commitment to building a robust public AI infrastructure. In addition to the release of the spawning 40M dataset, we plan to release an inaugural open source image model trained on 2 independent open architectures, making them available for public use and further development. This model will expose a new surface of Source Plus as we transition into a model marketplace. This phase finally opens the door for creators and rights holders that have historically been marginalized in the development process. The cavalier data practices used in training generative AI have left many creatives reticent to engage with AI as an entire category. Source Plus aims to provide a place for artists and creatives to safely explore what AI has to offer us by engaging with AI in a way that they can verifiably trust. So here we're hoping our slower but principled approach to data fundamentals can foster a new model of data ownership and commerce that aligns with artists' values and needs for control over their creative output. So in this new model marketplace, the transparency and integrity of a public AI provide a bedrock. And so what we mean by public AI is adhering to the new open source initiatives, emerging standards. Source Plus commits to a model of openness that goes merely beyond providing access to model weights, pushing for a higher bar in what constitutes an open source model. Okay, so I'm running out of time here, but the key to this is reproducibility and replicability. And so given this foundation of public AI, artists will be able to bring their works to Source Plus, fine-tune public diffusion models with their specific artistic styles and content, and retain ownership over the newly created models and its output. So with this approach, artists not only get access to a model of themselves that they can use as a tool for their studios and creative practices, but they can also license and monetize their distinct likeness. So in essence, phase 3 of Source Plus isn't just about offering these new tools. It's about trying to build on-ramps to a new data economy. I'm over time now, so I will leave it there, and we can maybe talk later if there's Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Cullen. Sure. I'm very eager to ask some questions afterwards because your talk was quite technical. So we also need to see how it fits it with everybody. But it's very exciting because you're talking about paradigm shift, moving from fear of to monetizing of. And this is also very much related to what we at the Norwegian IP office are very interested in communicating, is that, okay, it's not only fearing of somebody else copying, but how can you actually monetize what you have created and what you own? Thank you for that point. Sure. Our last speaker is Benita McKay. She's a patent attorney at Bryn Aarflot. She's a patent attorney both from UK and Europe, and she has specialized in protecting AI and software innovations. She has a PhD in applying AI to physics in bioengineering and is trained in one of Europe's top IP firms before joining Bryn Aarflot this August. Thank you for joining us. Please give a warm applause to Benita.
Thank you for the introduction. So I'm sorry, I'm going to skip your last slides there. Hello, everybody. So thank you for that lovely introduction. I am a patent advisor at Bryn Aarflot. I am part UK, part EU, qualified as a patent attorney, and my specialty, as said, is in AI. And while I like to come at it from a very technical, very legal standpoint sometimes, I also just enjoy playing with it, like some of the other speakers have mentioned. I have artists in my family, my mother, my sister, my mother-in-law. They are all artists and art teachers and illustrators. And so I also like to view AI from a creative perspective as well. So hopefully some of that will come across. I will be speaking about two main things. One is how to protect your creations from AI, and the other will be how to protect creations that have used AI. So perhaps you've used Midjourney, perhaps you've used Dolly to create art, or you've used any of these generative models to create music or dances or any form of creation. I'll also be briefly speaking about a couple more things if there's time at the end. So first off, very, very quick introduction to AI and IP. How does AI use your creations? Well, we've heard Colin talk about training, and that really is the kicker. Training data is what all these huge generative models require in massive quantities. So for the most part, when people hear about AI using people's creations, they're thinking about training data. Has it used their art, their dances, their writing to train? The other things it can use are outputs. Has it copied to produce an output? If I say, please create a Banksy-style illustration, and it comes out with a Banksy or a Banksy-inspired illustration, has that used Banksy's work? Yes. Same for the input prompts there. I have told it Banksy-inspired. Therefore, there's creations that have been used in the input. And this works, as I've said, for a whole range of creations. So any type of creation that humans can create, there's potential that a generative model can create that too. So what is IP? Well, here I mean intellectual, industrial, intangible property that someone can own, and that can be a person or an entity. So these are ideas, concepts, processes, methods, systems, a whole range of things. Some of these are registered, so people famously know about trademarks and patents, things that you go to the Industrial Property Office and have registered. The other is automatic, and I think the most famous one there is copyright. People know, kind of intrinsically, without being part of the IP world, that if you were to draw something creative, you would have the copyright on that. It can be valuable. We've got people talking about monetizing it, and it can also be stolen. So, how do you safeguard your creations from AI? Copyright is going to be your biggest tool in the toolbox. It is the automated legal protection to creative original work. So this is all your art, all your music, anything that's got something creative and original at heart. It covers both published and unpublished work. This is sometimes crucial when it comes to training data. If you haven't put that work out there into the world, into the public domain, it's still protected. And that means if someone were to somehow get that and use that for training without your consent, there are ways for you to deal with that. And the lifespan is long for copyright. It's fantastic. It is your life plus 20, 50, 70 years, depending on where you are in the world, but for the most part, you're looking at your life plus 70 years. And how can it protect my innovation? Well, it gives you the tools to say, please don't use that, please don't reproduce that, please stop copying that. This is really, really important in ways that people don't always think of immediately. So the classic one is the artist Grimes. She famously said something along the lines of copyright is useless, doesn't like copyright. But then when people started using her voice, with her permission originally, in generative models to create songs using her vocal likeness, people started creating really quite nasty things. She didn't like that, entirely understandably. I would not like my voice saying racist, nasty, horrible things. And so she used copyright to stop people from using her voice in that way. So it gives you control over things that you have created. And you can sell, license, etc., that control to create value. So, how do you use it to protect what is yours? I'm a lawyer, I'm sorry, I'm going to say document everything, I'll probably repeat it. If you can prove that you created it when you created it, that's a really strong starting off position. Often that can be enough. If you go to someone and say, you've copied my work, this is proof of I created it at this date before you, sometimes that can be enough. To really kind of prevent unauthorized training and the like, it's the same things that you guys have used before when computers came out. So it's personal watermarks. If you've seen some of these really old image generator models, some of them actually produce likenesses to the Getty Images watermark. You can see where they got their training data. These watermarks can be very, very useful. You can also embed secrets. So software code, for example. Software code, subject to copyright, just like other writing. You can put in Easter eggs. So maybe embed your birthday or the name of your first, second pet, something that's very easily linked to you. And then if this generative AI spits out some code based on your code, oh, hey, I recognize my birthday in there, it's very easy to prove where it's come from. The other thing is, when you're making something public, you guys, especially in the photography world, are probably used to this, make it low quality and therefore hard to scrape. If you can embed it in that PDF as a really low quality image, people aren't going to want that for training data. The other thing is make it known, copyright protected, date it, license it with your CC licenses, all these things that you guys already know are already doing. So the AI Act has recently come in. It's going to be in force. This is fantastic, I think, for creators because it means that AI creators have to comply with EU copyright law, even if they are not based in the EU. So I'm not going to go too much into the data mining. We've got another expert on that. But as you guys have seen, opt-outs are available. The interesting bit is training data must be disclosed. The exact detail will have to come out with time, but it does mean that if your creations have been used in a data set, you should be able to tell, because they will have to publish in sufficient detail for you to be able to tell. So suddenly, some of the power, some of that black boxness should go away. So, if you are using these new tools, how do you protect what's yours? It's a little bit messy. The question of who owns AI-generated creations is complicated. It really is different in different countries. So we've recently had an amazing case in China where someone who was using generative AI to create an image went through several iterations of changing it and tweaking it and really making this output theirs. And it was found that it belonged to them. Now, I'll go into that a bit later, or possibly in the panel. But it does mean that in some countries, it is protected. However, in the US, a similar case, different artist, different image, was found to not have any particular ownership. The author did not have any particular ownership. So this is different in different countries. The other thing is to double-check the terms and conditions of these models. Just like Grimes used copyright to protect what was coming out because she didn't like it, a lot of these AI creators will have terms and conditions that allows them to keep ownership of what is coming out. Most of them, personal opinion, is to control bad things from populating. Things that would affect their brand image, for example, things that they don't want out there that would create controversy. However, there's no reason why they couldn't use those same ownership rights to perhaps monetize something that you've created. It's worth reading through these T's and C's. So again, it's kind of coming back to copyright, but the questions really come down to the core of what copyright is. Is it creative? Is it original? So as I've said, some countries view that creative core as you putting in a lot of effort, a lot of iterations. Can you prove you put in those effort and iterations? It's not just a prompt. But then what if you have a very, very creative prompt? Is it the prompt that has the copyright, or is it the output? These things are very complicated. And so again, I'm going to say, document everything. Prove that you wrote these prompts. Prove that there was an effort and repetition perhaps going in. Do you tweak the output? Do you put it into Photoshop or your editors and make alterations? So for Silvia's friend, where the core of the image was generated by AI and she just painted it in, I'm sure the painting required a lot of skill, but did it require creative effort? I'm not sure whether that would be copyright protected. I'd have to know more about that one. But if you had created the core, the sketch, and then you perhaps had one of these AI models just fill in the color, did that still have creative effort? I think so. I think you did the core creative bit of that. So it's case by case, and you can't always rely on copyright. Where you can't rely on copyright, you might be able to fall back on contracts and licenses. So a famous US presidential candidate had a famous lawyer who paid quite a famous woman for the rights to a story. It meant that nobody else could publish that story. Nobody else could monetize that story or put it out there in the public domain. He had the rights. Similarly, there was a royal wedding, and a British tabloid and a famous streaming service had the rights to the images and video of this wedding. It meant that other newspapers, other photographers, could not crash this wedding and get images because all of the rights were owned by somebody else. These people could have been sued by the tabloid and the streaming giant if they had used these images. You can do something similar. These things don't have to be creative. They don't have to be original, as with copyright. Contract law is very similar across the EU and various countries, and you can make these contracts international. You don't have the same exemptions to copyright for education and data mining and the like. You could say, license out, with a sole license, all of your work to one AI creator, and then the other AI creators wouldn't be able to use it. Potential pitfalls, therefore, of using AI. Compliance with the AI Act is going to be the big major one at the moment, so make sure that you would disclose to buyers of your art if you have used AI. And compliance with IP law. If you are saying, generate me a Banksy illustration, are you infringing? And copyright does not always protect these works. Most countries are going with AI-generated outputs aren't creative and original. I'm not sure how long that will stay that way, because AI is quite similar to cameras, in my personal opinion. When the camera first came out, IP judges like to say that photographs weren't creative. You just pointed the camera and clicked. We know that's not true. We know the art and the creativity that goes into photography. I think something similar will happen with AI tools over time. So a very quick final thought, looking at the time. There are other rights out there. It's not all about copyright and contracts. You can perhaps patent these systems. You can trademark these images. The design of something, you can register and protect. And you can use database rights to protect all of your works together. They do not have to be copyright protected individually. for you to have that database right. Again, what steps should I take? Document everything, please. Name and date, maybe even sign it if it's physical. Proof what creative effort went in there, and the fact that you did it. Potentially opt out of data mining if that is a concern, and take protective measures like the watermarks and the low quality, and really consider using contracts to protect what copyright might not. And I won't go for the summary. Thank you.
This discussion will be a bit shorter than we have hoped for, but let's make the most of it.
Great.
Okay. Thank you for coming here. Benedikte, you haven't been on the stage yet, so maybe we start with introducing. Who are you and why are you here?
I was an audience member just moments ago, and now I'm part of the panel. Yeah, I am a researcher at the University of Oslo. I work right across the parking lot here at the Department of Informatics. I did my PhD in the world of generative AI for creative output, focusing on generating dance, actually, which is quite an interesting sort of cross-section, multimodal thing when it comes to these questions of protection and things like that. So that's how my work, my interests sort of intersect with the stuff that we've been discussing today.
But say a little bit about dance, because we've talked a lot about other types of forms. So why dance? Why? Tell us a little bit about your research.
Sure. Initially, it started out, I think, mostly as speaking to my interest as a technical challenge, because dance is such a complex thing with a lot of other creative material. It's slightly more easy maybe to tokenize, to basically describe in a way that can then be protected. Whilst dance is ephemeral, it happens in the moment, it's more of a performance thing. So I thought, can we even, build an AI that can generate believable dance? But then AI is AI, and it will do its thing. And during the 5 years or so that I was doing my PhD, way bigger companies than the University of Oslo, were producing these insane models with vast amounts of training data. And I could also produce some dance with my own generative AI that I developed. And so then the question suddenly became, why? Why would I train an AI to generate dance? Who is this for? Why is this interesting to the artistic community? And this brought me into these questions of working more closely with the dancers themselves and exploring how would they use the AI in their own pursuits. Yeah.
But the question of ownership is a little bit different in your case, if we have to compare it with the other cases that we've discovered. How do your artists relate to ownership?
I think it is quite different for several reasons. Partly, I mean, I am not a lawyer, but I'm sure you can maybe confirm or deny this, but the notion of even copyrighting a choreography didn't really happen until, I don't think, 60 years after the general copyright law came into action. So it was something that you really couldn't copyright or own in that way. And that might be part of why I feel like the community, different dance communities maybe don't have as clear strong feeling around this notion of ownership. And the other thing is that basically, I mean, in order to do a dance performance, an AI can't really do that in most settings, right? You need a physical body. And so in my experience working also with generative music, in my meetings with musicians, I was often met with a lot of fear and at times also hostility. And for good reason. I mean, this was jobs were being taken away to a larger extent. Whilst with dancers, I don't feel that they necessarily had that feeling of there being a threat from AI. So that might also be a reason.
That's an interesting take on it. We've talked just briefly when you step off the stage about the paradigm shift that you build the foundation for opting out, and then and also now building the opting in, and say, okay, from fear to monetizing. This is quite a big change. But who would be your customers, Cullen? Who are the artists? Or who will be monetizing? Why would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different targeted customers. So right now, it's mostly people who are fine-tuning works. But I think what you're describing, particularly in this phase 3, where we actually expose the models, I mean, even in phase 2. So in phase 2, where people bring their data to us, people who are doing, people who are working in traditional licensing markets that are a little bit more courageous or pioneering, that are willing to actually start to price their data for single training runs. So we have a number of customers, largely web hosting platforms, IP magnates, if you will, that have corpuses of data that is novel for licensing purposes. But even taking that the next step towards actually licensing your likeness, right? Like the idea that, you know, I'm a musician, that I can take all of my unpublished work, fine-tune one of these public domain models that we're going to release, and then open that up to a marketplace where people can come and generate music based off of the data that's been fine-tuned. I think it's mostly for people who are curious and creative to see about sort of creating a marketplace around their likeness, and also just as a tool in the studio. The fact that, you know, like, I mean, again, I disagree with many of Silvia's points. I think that as a tool that is trained on a corpus of my own work, to have those as my studio assistants is fantastic. So I think filling in the gaps, enabling artists who don't have the capital to fill out a full studio model and have been reticent to join this new world for reasons of ethical or responsible quandaries, they can now start to fill out their studio by training a model based on their own data on a foundation of public domain, on a model that's trained on public domain data.
Yeah, thank you. So that would be the people that you've worked with in your research, Benedikte, with those who have borrowed their bodies to do the research. That would be creating. Do you see any dangers here? And what with your copyright law hat, do you see any dangers for the type of work that Cullen has been doing?
So I think that Cullen's work is great. So I think this fits perfectly into the IP rights that are out there, so database rights, the copyright, and some of the other intellectual rights as well. This is a way for people to really define what their rights cover and also monetize it, add the value to it, license it in a way that they have the help out there. I think platforms like this are brilliant because not everybody has the ability, especially small startups or sole SMEs, etc., to go and consult with a copyright lawyer. I'm aware of that. And to have platforms that make defining your rights and protecting your rights and using your rights easily, fantastic. So this sounds like you guys are really on it with the IP law.
Thank you. That's very flattering. I mean, it's interesting because we just saw this as a right, and then we realized that the way that this is ultimately enforceable, where the hammer behind all of that is ultimately copyright. So, however, I mean, I won't get into my feelings about copyright. I think that it's ultimately provides a utility in this context that, helps people who are rights holders.
I think it's worth pointing out that these laws, so the AI Act and the original copyright acts across the world, etc., they tend to have been made with creators in heart. So if it feels, very unlawful here, very unscientific, if it feels like you should have a right, you probably do. Now, over time, of course, these have been molded to the benefit of society as well as the individual and the benefit of these big corporations, etc., as well. So there is some balancing there. But things like choreographers, for example, they know that they've put in some creative effort there. They know that not everybody could do what they have done. And there are rights that go along with that. There are ways of protecting that. And it's things like when you see on TikTok and YouTube, etc., when people copy a choreography, sometimes the choreographers don't mind, but they do mind when their name hasn't been mentioned. These all go along with IP rights. The fact that you have to be mentioned is important. And people kind of know that instinctively. They might not know the rights. They might not even know what IP is, but they know that their name should have been mentioned there.
What do you think, Benny?
I think attribution goes a long way. It definitely does. There are cases where there was this quite a famous case on where a dancer had their a series of steps, I guess they were called in the legal terms, was how they defined this as a choreography, a short choreography, which was used by Epic Games in Fortnite. Because in Fortnite, you obviously it's free to play, but you pay for these emotes, you pay for your virtual character to do certain things, mostly dances. And so one choreographer tried to then go up against Epic Games and say that you're selling and making money off of my work, my choreography. And it's a complicated, the wording of the law there, as I understand it, is quite vague. So you have things like simple steps are not protected by copyright law. So what is a simple step? Easy to do, is that what it means? Or if it's part of a communal dance, because that's also a place where I think that dance still sort of stands out a little bit, is that it is something that is usually taught in person or as mentioned in via video observation, and then it becomes a little harder to really know what's what. Yeah.
Attribution goes a long way, no matter what. It takes control of what you think you have created. That's also a very important message to take. I'm afraid we have run out of time, so I'm very grateful that you're still here, both online and physically. I have just one question to the end. So what do you think, if there is anything unique that is human creation? What is it that is unique? Is there anything that is just unique to humans? Or should we even ask that question?
Oh, I've been putting it. I think currently our ability to balance pattern recognition with spontaneity in the middle of there is that creative spark that is uniquely human. In the future, will that maintain? To be only human, I don't feel confident saying yes. I think as AI develops, that creative spark that I do think currently is very human might not be only human.
I think that I would be inclined to say no. But also, there's one thing that sort of niggles at me, and I can't really let it go, and that's this notion of experience. We have experience, we have consciousness that is closely tied. As I think Silvia mentioned when it came to Banksy, Banksy had a political statement which would shape their work, and then as long as AI does not have a conscious experience that there's something that it is to be an AI, I think on that point we'll have obviously a leg up until that day, until the singularity. I think we can kind of stake our claim in that at least.
What is your take on it, Cullen?
Well, I'm not making any predictions, but yeah, I think it has something to do with what you're saying too. Like a will or qualia. Some of these things I think are, at least for now, sort of the last bastion.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm afraid we have to stop here. It would be really nice to continue talking to you. We can do this afterwards for those who are present here physically. We can still stand for a while. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for joining us online also. And that's it. Welcome to our next event at the Norwegian Industrial Property Office. Thank you.